Welcome to week 5. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. We actually got snow here in Texas. Wow. That very rarely happens. I guess about once a year here lately, which is abnormal. But anyways, hope you had a great weekend. Hope you are anticipational about this week, what it holds in store for you. Hope you enjoyed the opportunity of getting to unpack assignment 2, validation. This is an area that I work in more frequently than a lot of the other skills. Why? Because I feel like so much of the time we look for validation externally prior to internal. And I believe that the idea of not having internal validation, thus resolve, actually causes a lot of our conflict. External conflict is a derivative based upon internal conflict. So as a result of that, if we can have internal resolve, that helps us to be able to move forward in a lot of things, especially marriage counseling when we're looking at the other one to receive validation. So if that happens, that affirms, and if it doesn't, then it creates anger. So as a result of that, you can see how validation is crucial. This week, we're going to be looking at chapters 9 and 10. I'm going to talk with you within this lecture through some of the dynamics of chapter 10. Won't go through all of them, but we'll touch on a few of them. So therefore, you'll have to read chapter 10 while before and or after watching this lecture. But you have assignment 3. Assignment 3 is basically like assignment 1 and 2, dealing with active listening. And so I put in a video from an individual that has a PhD, and he is a communication coach. And he actually has an hour-long training in this very area. So I wanted you to be able to hear from a different individual within this arena, just so that you can hear a different perspective about active listening and, of course, understanding the importance of it. I'm going to let him talk to you about the 4 different dynamics of why it can be impactful and helpful. So let's see, right here, we're going to jump off the bat of looking behind the behavior. People are going to come in because of a behavior, something that had been done to them, perpetrated upon them, something that they have encountered within the atmosphere, within the individual, and or their own personal behavior. A lot of times people come in because they are aware of the behavior, because of something that somebody had made known to them, because they have the introspection to look internally, and as a result of that, determine, hey, this is something that is impacting. But the idea of how do they resolve that? How do they resolve that? And a lot of times the methodology is actually the problem that actually is continuing to predicate this cyclical dynamic of that's empowering it to continue. People come in because of pornography or because of whatever it may be, substance, you name it. And they come in because they're aware of this very dynamic. But the idea of how do they stop that? And this is where I think, the idea of just, hey, stopping it, does that really help? And then communicating the idea of just stopping it, we understand, really is not beneficial, but do we communicate things contextually that actually communicates that very premise? So a lot of times when I'm working with an individual to help them be able to see behind the behavior is talking through it contextually. How potentially we got here, what legitimate need does it serve? If they can understand that there is a legitimate need that is empowering this illegitimate expression, then as a result of that, it creates the opportunity for them to stop shaming themselves. Because shame is going to predicate the need for comfort. And if they have they've built up a way of comforting themselves, a comforting mechanism, then as a result of that, the next time that they feel whatever it is that they feel, then they're going to turn to the comfort of their choice. Pornography, extramarital affair, overeating, overwork, whatever it may be. And so helping them understand the context of that, context drives grace, grace thus forgiveness. And so in that, what does that process look like? By helping them understand things like pressure and stress and the chemical composition of that cortisol, which we understand through the research of cortisol is that it impacts our immunity. Because when we are in a place of fight, flight, or freeze, all the immunity of our gut, which really primarily houses our immunity, is extracted to our limbs to get us to run, okay? Which can be helpful depending upon whom we're running to, right? God. But a lot of times, if we built up a comforting mechanism, like some of the ones I've talked about, then the times that we feel these things, it's going to make it's going to empower us to run to those things. And yet, then we are back into that cycle of, I did it again. Okay, I'm going to try harder not to do this very thing. But in that essence, that philosophy of trying harder not to do the very thing, we're adding additional pressure, thus stress, thus cortisol. And so you can see the impact of it. So it impacts our immunity. It dumbs us down because of where it actually impacts us in the brain, or where cortisol impacts the brain. It makes us approach everything with negativity. It makes us almost fail at every task based upon the way it impacts us. And there was one other dynamic according to the research. Maybe it'll come back to me. I apologize for not remembering that off the top of my head. And I think we've talked about this already. I know I've talked about it in other classes. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think I may have. If I have and it's redundant, I do apologize. But it's worth actually communicating again. Why? Because cortisol is impacting. It's a benefit. Why? Because if we're driving down Highway 114, someone pulls out in front of us, we don't have, we need that fight, flight, or freeze to allow us to slam on our brakes before we run into the person in front of us. If it's about conscious awareness of us saying, oh my goodness, the guy pulled out in front of me, oh my, I need to actually slam on, but by that time, we've already hit the individual. So it is important. I've had people ask me, well, Brady, if it's so detrimental, then why is it that we would have that? And it's because it's important, except for we are operational. A lot of people are operational in this, and it's impacting them significantly because we don't see how what stress does to us. We talk about it, but what is the impact of stress, thus cortisol, the chemical of that, and what it does to actually the body. So looking behind the behavior, what is empowering the very thing that they're doing, and understanding that there's always a legitimate need behind the illegitimate expression. There is, whether it's pornography, well, okay, there's the need of potentially the need of connection, the need of intimacy. Okay, anything wrong with intimacy and connection depending upon how they're getting it met? No. But in that, those legitimate needs are being expressed illegitimately. And you can take that and unpack that in all things. And so in that, when we think about looking behind the behavior, I'm wanting to see what illegitimate need is being expressed through the behavior that has them in trouble, right? If it is their behavior, if it is the behavior of their spouse, again, we want to unpack that a little bit. Because if we jump in and only try to undo the behavior, then as a result of that, that's equivalent to going out and picking a dandelion in your yard, but not getting the root of it, right? It may come back, more than likely it will come back, but it may look different, may have different texture, but it's still going to grow. Why? Because the root of it hasn't been addressed. And so the dynamic of understanding source, as Genesis 3, when the enemy came to challenge Adam and Eve through the power of suggestion to get them to change sources. As a result of that, you can see the impact of this really playing itself out in the people sitting across from you. So you're saying that really my need it could be rooted in intimacy? Maybe. But what I do know is that we all have needs. And if we look at the names of God, defender, protector, redeemer, counselor, provider, and really, I believe, now again, this isn't about me indoctrinating anybody, but the idea of just kind of sharing this, I believe every name that God that is representational in Scripture communicates to a need that mankind has. Why? So that we can understand that God is source. So in that time of defense, if we don't take that place of defense, but we allow God to take that place, then what happens? But if we take that place, then as a result of that, pain and issues will come. And a lot of times in the form of comfort, in the form of peace. Why? Because we gravitate because of the whole pain-pleasure sensation, and we think of everything of pain bad, dissipate, everything of pleasure good, move towards. But I'm so grateful that Jesus, understanding the difference in the dynamic in that very moment in the garden, understood that pain, apologize for that pain was needed in that moment to break through that threshold so he go to the cross. So in that, what do we see? To be able to see behind the behavior. What is the behavior communicating? What is it? Especially if you're working with children and teenagers. Well, they stole a police car. Oh, okay. Well, in that, is that because of the behavior, or are they trying to get mom and dad's attention? Are they trying to get mom and dad's attention? I remember hearing one of my early mentors talked about times when he would travel significantly, and his kiddos, a lot of times they would act up when he was gone. And what he came to understand was when he would get home, his wife would say, "Hey, guess what? Little Billy is in trouble." So this my mentor would go and interact with Billy. What was Billy wanting? The legitimate need was the idea of connecting with dad. And so he knew that, guess what? If he got in trouble, that created an opportunity for dad to have to interact with him when he got home. And so by dad interacting with him, that reinforced this thought, this belief, so that when dad was gone next time, little Billy knew that, oh man, I just need to get in trouble again. Why? Because I get this legitimate need met. And we see that within children. Children are brilliant. Please don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. Children are brilliant, and they understand systems, and they understand how to work systems. I remember having a child one time come in my office, and he was like, "Hey, really, what I'm needing is I'm needing help." And I'm like, "Okay, well, what's going on?" Well, my mom and dad are divorced. Okay, well, my thought is, okay, we didn't talk about it. Well, really, the problem is dad is offering this for my Christmas gift, but mom's only offering this. Which one's the better deal? I remember scratching my head, kind of like, oh, oh, oh. So children know systems. They understand how to evaluate systems. And in that, how do they move forward in the things that they believe that they want? So when we see behaviors, how do we look behind them? And I want you, ladies and gentlemen, to start evaluating and assessing what is the behavior. Okay? If all things communicate, because all things were created through communication, what we do, what we don't do, what we say, and what we don't say, then what is this saying? And a lot of times, you'll hear me, and it sounds like a broken record in a session. When somebody will say something, I'll be like, well, what does that communicate to you? Okay. And I'll say that. So when this happens, what does that communicate to you? Well, I don't know. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. How can we get to a place of knowing what it does communicate? Oh, Brady, that's a good question. I guess it communicates that I'm not good enough. Oh, there it is. The belief. The belief. What is the belief? Understanding through Dr. Bruce Lipton's research that 95% of behavior happens from a subconscious orientation, that if we can see behind it, then we can see the belief, so that we can actually help them start doubting the very thing that they actually have a exclamation point and a stake in the ground, that this is who they are, or this is what they have to do in order to get whatever needs that they have met. And so much of the time, it's happening at a subconscious orientation that they not even be aware that they're doing these things. That's the reason why one of my favorite passages in Scripture is when Jesus is mediating to the Father, saying, "Father, forgive them. They don't even know what they're doing." This Scripture used to cause me all kinds of frustrations, because I always was like, Jesus, I know you're in a power, but it seems like you're enabling to mankind. But understanding neurology, what we see is the dynamic is this is what he was speaking to. And so we see the importance of awareness, not only any awareness, but self-awareness. And we understand awareness takes place linearly. Typically, it starts out, not always, because of introspection, the idea of being able to assess and look internally, but we see the dynamic of what is usually somebody, "Hey, Brady, do you realize when this happens, this is what you do?" Oh, no. I can either push back on that or receive that and saying, oh, that's external to internal. Then it's after the fact. It's usually, this is where we get the idiom of hindsight's 20/20. After it's taken place, then I come to him like, oh, I did that very thing again. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to, or whatever it may happen. Okay, there's still awareness. Awareness predicates change. And this is the great thing. We cannot change what we're not aware of. But we want to be aware in the moment. It's kind of like a race car driver, let me back up, talking with an individual and saying, okay, so now that we're aware of whatever it may be, how long have we been doing this very thing? 20 years. Oh, okay. So what's happened? Well, maybe 10 years, maybe 5 months, whatever it may be. But every time that they've done that, they've conditioned and trained the body to respond when they feel that, when they think that, when they experience whatever that is. Then all of a sudden, the body is doing a Google or Bing search or whatever your search engine is, and all of a sudden it's populating all these results, and it's telling the body, "Hey, this is the last time." Telling the brain, thus the body, these are all the times that we responded last time, and it's happening at the speed of sound, probably even faster. I don't know. To where we're responding and to the point of like, oh my goodness, I just did it again when we come to. It's like telling that NASCAR driver that only turns left, hey, you know what? Part of the problem is that we're turning left. Oh, so the problem is that we need to turn right. Okay. Oh man, I'm turning left again. Oh man, I keep turning left. Okay. But the beauty is that you're aware that you need to turn right. But Brady, I keep turning left. Yeah, I realize that. But we're aware. And so again, where awareness is creates opportunities for change to follow, because we cannot change what we're not aware of. That's why one of the greatest things that I want people to leave in is the opportunity of awareness. To become aware of what is impacting them, what they're doing, what their beliefs, and all the complexities within their body that can either be impacting that positively and or negatively. So the point of, oh, I just turned left. Okay, so when you just turned left, were you aware that you needed to turn right? Yes. Oh, that's awareness in the moment. Great things can happen as we become more aware in the moment. Yeah, but Brady, I still turn left. I realize that. And because the amount of times that you've been turning left for 20 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, it may take us a little time to get to the place where we could turn right. How do we make sure we're not beating ourselves up emotionally every time we turn left? Because if we do that, we create shame, thus comfort. And if comfort has always led us to the place of whatever behavior that's got us in trouble, or the behavior that we want to stop, then what we can do is we can see how we can feed that cycle and be right back in it. To the point, Brady, you won't believe what happened. What's going on? I finally turned right. Awesome. How'd that happen? Well, just like what we talked about, I came up to the place and moment where typically I turn left, and I recognize that a need for right. Oh, so you're aware in the moment? Yeah. And then what? Then I turn right. Whoa. Outstanding. But sometimes it can take some time. And for us to create the context so that the individual is aware that it could take time is needed and necessary. Why? Because we live in a society that wants everything instantaneous. And when we become aware of something that's impacting us, we want that thing to go and to change when instantaneous. Well, does God work in instantaneous zaps? Sure he does. But a lot of times he works within the process. And even though we look at the linear progression of who we are as a person, that is a process. So even if it's a zap, that's just a microcosm of a moment in time in the process of who we are. So it's always a process, regardless if it's that zap or that zap is very elongated into a process. So helping them to see, hey, guess what? If this is the goal, this is where our destination is, then what is that step that we can take today through our awareness? Through our awareness. So, awareness, important. Being able to see behind the behavior, important. Why? Because when we can understand how to evaluate what people are coming in, because if we only see the behavior, are we dealing with just traditional behavioralism? Now again, I'm not anti, so please hear me, because I believe that behavioral therapy is through its evolutionary process is where we got CBT, cognitive behavioral, which is very impactful, even to the extent of rational emotive, which is one of the theories that I predominantly interact with. Why? Because I believe the ABC, the activating event, the belief, and the consequences give us three portals to be able to meet people in, depending on where they're coming from. Are they dealing with an event? Guess what? Meet them there. If they're coming with a belief, meet them with there. If they're dealing with the consequences based upon something that took place, then I can meet them there. So I like the idea of this, but true behavioralism, well, to me, I always like to get what is behind that, what is feeding that, what is motivating that. if we can understand some of these complexities that the Bible actually lays out through the scientific research that is coming from thereafter, then guess what? We can help them lay that context. Why? Because they may be believing something about themselves. Well, Brady, I've been dealing with this for 20 years and I just can't stop. Okay, right there. That is something of concern. I wouldn't tell them that, but why would it be something of concern? Because I'm curious if that's what they're saying, then what's empowering that is a belief behind that. What is that belief? That belief is that potentially I'm a mess up, I can't stop, I'm not strong enough, all these different things, and those belief orientation is what's feeding the opportunity that this will never change. 95% of what we do happens because of subconscious orientations and or beliefs. So what's behind the behavior? And so in that, what is our role as a clinician, as a counselor, as a psychotherapist, as a pastor, whatever terminology and role that you play, is helping people come into a place of awareness. And a lot of times they want to discount their awareness. Why? Because the behavior hasn't dissipated. But Brady, you don't understand. Oh, what did I miss? I'm still doing this thing. Oh, okay. Well, what do you mean, okay? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm not wanting to give them a pass or anything like that. I'm wanting them to see that, guess what? Are we taking a step moving in progressive movement towards what it is that we're wanting to do, what it is we're wanting to stop doing? And if the answer is yes, then guess what? That is something to be celebrated. So I'm always assessing the awareness factor and where they are in that to be able to determine, has apathy, this idea that what I believe is a silent killer. Typically, people aren't going to be aware that it's there until it's full-fledged. Why? Because little by little, it erodes the individual's hope and faith of taking the next step. Well, Brady, I've been doing this. I've tried everything, and I come to you as a last result or whatever it is. Okay, let's get to work. But even in that very statement, what is it that I am anticipational? Now, am I orienting everything based upon that? No, but I'm questioning, are they doing this as a box, checking a box? Do they have a belief that this isn't really going to work, but they're going to try one more time? If we don't address the beliefs that are empowering these behaviors, then as a result of that, the behaviors will never go. And even if they do, they're going to look differently. Why? Because the beliefs are what empower them to express who they are, or to express what that belief is. As a man believes in his heart, so is he. What we understand about research based upon Dr. Bruce Lipton is the idea that what we believe impacts what we perceive, what we think, what we feel, and so much. And so we can see that I believe that I'm not good enough. That if I believe I'm not smart enough, if I believe I'm not competent enough, if I believe whatever it may be, is that going to impact how I move forward? You betcha. You betcha. So in this, when you look at chapter 10 and the exceptional counseling challenges, part of this is I'm looking for the opportunity of what is their belief about themselves. Do they like themselves? Do they love themselves? Are they receiving the love of God? Do they believe God actually loves them? These foundational things, just as the disciples or the Pharisees came and said, of all the statements of your word, what is the greatest? And he says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Right? Not only, but being able to receive that. A lot of people understand that God's given that, but are we receiving that? And if not, then what is the belief that's resisting that? Do they love themselves? If the answer is no, then what is the belief that is resisting that? If so much about what we do is based upon the belief, then as a result of that, what is it that they're telling you and or showing you through their behavior? And sometimes their behaviors can be so shocking based upon whatever it is, that as a result of that, we can find ourselves chasing the behavior, to getting them to stop the behavior. Now, you may say, but Brady, some of the behaviors need to stop. You're exactly right. I agree wholeheartedly, right? but what is motivating? What is fueling the fire to that behavior and or expression? And again, if we only go after the behavior and or expression, then can it look differently based upon the behavior dissipating because there's something behind that that's still motivational. And so in this, as we look and reflect, what is it that a child, a teenager, an adult, a couple, a family is telling you based upon what's in front of you, based upon the behavior? People see behaviors. It is the very first way that we oriented psychology. When we look at philosophy, which was really the true orientation of psychology, and psychology really stemmed from the field of philosophy. I don't even know if I'm trying to have to recollect if psychology was even supposed to be a field. But it came as a result of the philosophers looking and saying, wow, look at the group. They all do this, but here's little Timmy over here, and he's doing that. So therefore, something has to be abnormal because what's normal is what everybody else is doing. What's abnormal is what they're doing. And so therefore, they would dissect the individual based upon behavioral and or expressions based upon what they could see externally. Then the field evolved and started looking at the internal compositions, neurology, thoughts, emotions, and those type of things. So as we look behind the behavior, what is it that they're trying to tell you? You're going to get parents, I don't understand what's going on. My child was a princess, was a prince, whatever it may be, and now they're doing this. Okay. So my thought is, what is it that they're trying to communicate? Is it okay that they're communicating this? But in that, has the parents repressed that because what they're communicating, or the way, a better way of saying it, the way that they're choosing to communicate it is causing some harm? Now, am I an advocate for them throwing chairs across the living room floor? Of course not. But in that, when they did that, how was it responded to? Well, Brady, how would you respond without parents getting upset? I get that. Being a dad of three, I get that. But what we want to make sure that we're assessing is if children are trying to not only express themselves, but through their expressions is their communication, because they don't have the conscious orientation like you and I do to be able to communicate like you and I do. Well, is that enabling? Well, it can be, depending on what age range they are. But let's say for a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old, do you feel like what it is that they're communicating is that they're trying to tell their parents something? They just don't have the forte to be able to communicate it because they really don't even know what it is. They just know that there is something off as the body speaks. Again, you get to determine that. But in this video, not going into the complexities of all chapter 10, but really kind of setting up shop here because I feel like these are two of the most vitals. The idea of looking behind their behavior because of understanding what the behavior is trying to communicate. And not only that, but helping them become more introspective and reflecting on what is inside me, because what's inside me is going to, not if it comes out, but when it comes out. And this is why repression is so vital, because again, in the magnitude that I push things out causes pressure. Well, we just talked about pressure and stress, how it creates cortisol. Not only that, but the kindest thing that the apparatus of the body that God created is to get it back to the surface. Well, if it comes back to the surface, we're going to have those thoughts, those feelings, those experiences all over again. But again, if we push them back down, it becomes a proverbial adult version of the game of Jack in the Box. We start hearing the sound, dun, 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 and all of a sudden it pops up, and we push it right back down. And pushing it back down really never gets us anywhere. And we see this within the story of Cain. Again, I communicate this story. Why? Because I think it's so impactful in all the classes that I teach, is because we see God coming to create awareness for Cain. Let's back up. Who was Cain? Of course, he was the one of the sons of Adam and Eve, right? And he was a brother to Abel. And so in that, God asked for an offering. He brought what was left over. God rejected it. Did God reject him? No. rejected his offering, how did Cain interpret the rejection? Potentially as that God was rejecting him. Now, did God reject him? Of course not. Did he reject what he brought him? Yes. So the next thing that we can read is the idea of God coming to Cain to bring awareness through the formation of a question. Doesn't say he cannot, doesn't say, so he asks, why are you so angry? Doesn't say he can't be angry or he shouldn't be angry, but ask him, hey, why are you so angry? In hopes of awareness so that the opportunity of ownership can happen, to be able to invite him into that, to be able to move forward. Then what does God say? He sits at your door and knocks. So repression happened there, and then the next opportunity of what we can read is the interaction between Cain and Abel, and next thing you know it, what was repressed comes out, and he jumps on his brother and takes his life. When the behavior always will communicate something. The behavior of Cain, what did it communicate? Rejection? Possibly. Abandonment? Maybe. But as you think through this and as you read Scripture, think of it through this light. The behaviors that we read, what potentially could have been communicated in them to actually do that very thing? Was it fear? Was it rejection? Was it abandonment? Whatever it was. And how do we go back? If they would have been able to see God as source in that very moment, how would that have been able to change their behavior? And so if you'd have been there in front of Cain, if you'd have been there in front of Abraham, if you'd have been there in front of Peter, whomever it may be, how would you have been able to communicate it in a way to get them to a place of awareness? Just as God, do you love me? You know I do, right? Deflection. You know I do. Then feed my sheep. Do you love me? You know that I do. Again, deflection. Feed my sheep. Do you love me? It pains me. But you know all things. Awareness. Emotion, logic, just as Peter addressed. And in that, what do we see? Peter being completely different based upon that. So I know I want to keep this a little bit shorter. I know that y'all have got a lot of work as y'all continue to wrap up this semester. And of course, I know we have a couple more weeks, but I want to keep this a little bit shorter. Go back and review chapter 9, read it. Chapter 10, all the different subjects, subcategories that I'm looking at, all of them. I only kind of really touched on 2 because I think I felt like I wanted to just layer those 2 and really kind of spend a little bit more time talking about those 2, okay? But as you read Scripture, think about those dynamics. What's behind the behavior? What is it communicating? What is the legitimate need that's expressing that behavior in the way that they expressed it? And then not only that, but awareness. How would you have communicated the opportunity of bringing them into awareness to see God as source? Hope you have a great week. Look forward to reading your assignments. And I hope you have a great week. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance on you and give you peace for this week. All right, you guys and ladies, have a great week. And if you need anything, let me know. Thank you.